Another shelf-stable meal in a jar to add to your prepper pantry. Hey guys, I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you another meal in a jar recipe. The jar meal that I'm putting together today is a chicken shepherd's pie. This is a dish that I used to make for my kids all the time. Back in the good old days, you know, when groceries were affordable, I used to always find half-price rotisserie chickens at my Walmart. The big family size ones, and lots of them. Whenever I found them, I would always buy several and bring them home, and the first thing I would do is take off all the drumsticks because they're kind of a pain in the butt to pick the meat off of, but my kids like eating them. So I would make a few easy side dishes and we would have a drumstick chicken dinner the first night. After I took off the drumsticks, I would drain off all the juices that had accumulated in the bottom of the chicken containers, and then I'd pick off all the rest of the meat. I'd portion that meat up and freeze it in the amounts needed for our favorite recipes, and boil the carcasses to make soup or broth. We got so many meals for so little money using those half-price rotisserie chickens. I always kept one batch of meat out to use right away. I'd use the juices I saved to make a gravy, stir in some of the picked chicken meat, and use that as the base of the shepherd's pie. I'd just layer on some canned corn, maybe some cream corn, and some mashed potatoes on top, and it made a yummy, homey dinner that everyone enjoyed. Now, if you watch our channel, you know that I love to save money and stock up on things when they're on sale. Every month, Thrive Life, our favorite freeze-dried food company, has new delivery specials for that month. So I always like to come up with a meal in a jar that uses some of the monthly sale items. This way, I can stock up on the ingredients when they're on sale and make a bunch of that meal to stock our shelves. This month's sale items included chopped chicken and mashed potatoes. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to recreate the chicken shepherd's pie as a jar meal? If you want to grab any of these items while they're on sale, I'll put a link down in the video description for you to check out. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any future sales, you can text SALE to the number right down there at the bottom of your screen. And I'll have that down in the description box as well. That's our new text alert system that we've been using, and it's been very popular. You'll get alerts right on your phone, not only for the monthly specials, but also the big sales that they have a few times a year, any coupon codes and flash sales that Thrive Life comes out with. People have been loving this system. They really love getting those alerts so that they don't miss out on any deals. So let's get started putting together this meal in a jar. This one's going to be a little different than most of my jar meals because I'm going to use 2 jars instead of just one so that we can have the 2 different layers of the shepherd's pie. And make sure you stick around till the end of the video because I've got a special treat. Today, we're doing dessert as well as dinner. So make sure you stick around and find out what I have planned. So I told you we're going to be using 2 jars for this recipe. The first jar that we're going to start with is going to be a quart size mason jar. I use wide mouth quart mason jars. It's easier to get things in and out of them. You don't need much else to get started on these jar meals. I'm going to be using a canning funnel just to make it easier to get things in and out. And of course, you just need a few measuring cups and spoons, just basic things. So the first ingredient I'm going to be putting in my jar is going to be some chopped chicken. This is freeze-dried chicken. This is the chicken that's on sale this month. And I'm going to go ahead and add 1.5 cups of chicken. Now you can see that there's some powder in with this chicken because of the way that freeze-dried dries so completely. It can tend to crumble a little bit, so when I poured the can into my canister, the powder that was at the bottom came out on the top, and that's okay. That's actually not bad at all. That's actually just chicken powder, so it's going to give our recipe a little bit more flavor, a little bit more chicken boost, just like adding some broth would. So we've got 1.5 cups of chicken in there, and next I'm going to go ahead and add some peas. The peas are also on sale, and I thought this would be a great thing to put in this shepherd's pie. It's going to be a little bit more interesting than your typical shepherd pie that just has corn in it for the vegetable. Now I know that shepherd's pie is, a lot of people get on me about this. Shepherd's pie, I believe, is made with lamb. It's cottage pie if it's made with beef. It's got a totally different name if it's made with chicken. I can't even remember what that name is. And honestly, I've always called it shepherd's pie, so it doesn't matter to me what's in a name, right? I'm going to be adding 1/2 cup of the peas. So put 1/2 cup of those peas down in there. And next I'm going to be adding corn, which is your traditional shepherd's pie vegetable. I'm going to add also 1/2 cup of the corn. And next I'm going to be adding the ingredient that's going to give our flavor and our sort of sauciness to the bottom layer. I'm going to add this velouté, which is a fancy name for a chicken gravy. And I'm going to be adding 1/4 cup of the velouté. So that goes in there. I'm going to give that a shake and it will filter down among all the other ingredients. So next, for just a little bit extra flavor, I'm going to go ahead and add some chicken bouillon. This is just the chicken bouillon that I have open that I need to use up. Now, the good thing about this recipe, and really any recipe, is that if you are not supposed to eat as much salt, or maybe you just don't like things as salty, our family likes things pretty salty. So you can change this up. If you need to avoid salt, then I probably wouldn't add the bouillon. The chopped chicken is the one chicken that has no added salt. It's literally just chicken. And so that one already has no salt. That's why I'm adding these extra ingredients. But if you need to avoid salt, then some of this you could leave out. Always make things for your family's taste and your family's dietary needs. All right, so next I'm going to be adding some carrots. Now the carrots are the one ingredient that is dehydrated rather than freeze-dried, because when you freeze-dry carrots, they have a tendency to turn white afterwards. So these are dehydrated, so they are going to swell up a little bit, whereas the freeze-dried ingredients pretty much maintain the same size and shape that they always were, so they're not going to change in size and shape. These are going to swell up a little bit, so I'm only adding a 1/4 cup. They also have a pretty strong flavor. And then next I'm going to be adding some chopped onions, and I'm also going to add a 1/4 cup of the chopped onions. That has such a beautiful onion smell, and it's so nice to not have to chop raw onions to get that. Now my jar is getting pretty full, but there's a little bit of space left in the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add one more vegetable to the top of this jar. I'm choosing to add asparagus. You could add something different. Green beans would be probably more traditional, but I think that asparagus is a good spring vegetable, and since we're heading into spring, I like to use a lot of asparagus. We also really like this asparagus, so I'm adding a 1/2 cup of asparagus to my jar. Mushrooms would be another good thing that you could add if you like mushrooms. I tend to put mushrooms in just about everything because I love them. And so I'm trying to cool it because I know there's people out there who don't like mushrooms, and I don't want people thinking that every recipe that I do has mushrooms. But the good thing about recipes like this is that you can always change things up and do it with the things that you enjoy. So that's the end of my jar right here. You can see how pretty that looks. If I was going to be putting this away for long-term storage, I would put an oxygen absorber, a 200cc oxygen absorber, in the top of this jar before I put the lid on. But because I'm going to be making this up tonight to show you how it comes together, I'm not going to use an oxygen absorber. I'm just going to put the lid right on. But look at how beautiful that is. You can see all the different layers of all the different colored veggies. We've got the chicken in there. This is going to make a beautiful base for our shepherd's pie. So the next bunch of ingredients that I'm putting together are going to go into a separate jar, but I'm going to do this differently. Instead of layering them in the jar, I'm going to start by adding everything to this bowl and then mixing it so that it's going to be all blended together in the jar. I'm going to start by adding some mashed potato flakes. Now these are the kind of mashed potato flakes that are on sale this month at Thrive Life. They're just potato. They're not the kind of mashed potato flakes that have any kind of butter, salt, seasoning, garlic, milk powder, anything like that added. These are just purely potato. I'm going to be adding a 1.5 cups of these potato flakes. Now next I'm going to be adding another teaspoon of chicken bouillon into this mixture to give this a little bit more flavor. Once again, if you're trying to avoid sodium, you could certainly leave some of this out, or use a low sodium bouillon. Now next I'm going to go ahead and add a 1/4 cup of sour cream powder. Now let me tell you something that's kind of important here. When I was testing this recipe, I grabbed my canister of sour cream, and sour cream powder anyways, what I forgot was that I typically use Thrive Life sour cream powder, and I typically use it as an ingredient in my recipes to give it a creaminess. That's what I mostly use it for. And at one point I had bought a different brand, and it was time to use that brand up, so I opened that up recently, and I'm not saying anything bad about that brand, but what I found is that that other brand of sour cream powder had a much tangier flavor than what I'm used to. And so when I was trying recipes with this other brand, they just weren't working out the way that I intended them to, because I'm used to working with something else. So I'm going to kind of do a video and compare these two, I believe, and sort of compare and contrast them and see what each one is good for and what each one isn't. But I'm going to go ahead and open up a new can of my Thrive Life sour cream powder, because I think that is just going to work better in this recipe. Now these Pantry cans, which are the small quart size cans, this is the smaller can that you can buy the food in. These have a pop top, which is pretty awesome. Sometimes you find the larger can, the family can with a pop top, just because there was a period in time when they couldn't get the regular can tops they were using, but it's pretty rare. I actually like it when I find that because the pop top is so much easier. So I'm going to be putting in a 1/4 cup of the sour cream powder. But I guess the moral of the story there with the sour cream powder is that with some things you want to be aware of the brand that you're using, because there can be differences between different brands with certain things. Like with a bouillon, for example, you know, if I tested this recipe using this bouillon and you use a different bouillon, it might turn out a little bit differently. That's not going to be true for every ingredient. Like obviously some of the vegetables, a vegetable. You know, if you have some corn and peas that you freeze dried on your own at home, or that you have from a different brand or anything like that, it's probably going to be about the same. But some things like the sour cream can vary a lot. So be aware of the brand that you're using, because if you use a different brand, you may get a different result. So the next ingredient that I'm going to use is going to be 2 tablespoons of butter powder. This is just going to give our mashed potatoes a rich, you know, buttery sour cream kind of flavor. 2 tablespoons of butter powder. I am adding a teaspoon of salt. Now, once again, if you need to avoid salt or you don't enjoy salt as much, you can certainly cut back on that or leave it out entirely. And if you're not sure, then I suggest to go lightly the first time you try a recipe, because you can always add salt. People can always add salt to their portion if they want it a little saltier, but you can't take it out once it's in there. So always when you're trying out a recipe, if you're in doubt about it, try a little bit less, and you can always add more later. And I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of just black pepper. And then the final ingredient that I'm going to add to our potato mixture here is just going to be some chives, because I like it to be a little bit more colorful, and I really like the flavor that this adds. So we're really going to have like a sour cream and chive mashed potato topping here on our shepherd's pie, which is going to be pretty awesome. So that's all the ingredients that we're putting in our potato topping. So I'm just going to go ahead and pre-mix these, because I'd like all these ingredients to be pretty well blended and pretty evenly distributed when we go ahead and add this to our casserole. Because this is layered, we're not going to be mixing it after the fact, so that's why I'm mixing it ahead of time. All right, so there we go. So this mixture is just going to go into a pint-sized mason jar. Now this is a regular mouth pint, because this is very powdery. It doesn't have a lot of chunks. It's not going to be a problem getting it in or out of the jar, so I'm just using a regular mouth, but you can use whatever you have handy, whatever you have available. I'm just going to go ahead and use my funnel to get this mixture into the jar. Now when it starts to get full like this, I'm just going to take a minute to give it a little shake and a tap, and then we're going to have room for all the rest of our mixture. Now, once again, if we were putting this meal away for long-term storage, I would put an oxygen absorber into the top of this. I think 100 cc's would be plenty for this jar, this small jar. But I'm going to be making this up tonight, so I'm just going to put a lid on it, and there it is. So altogether, this is what you would have on your shelf. These 2 jars are going to make our dinner tonight, and all we have to do is add water. So to put this meal together, I'm going to be using this baking dish. This is my 8-inch square 2-quart Pyrex baking dish. You could use any baking dish of about this size, a 2-quart dish. Now this is a baked dish, so if you were in an emergency where you didn't have power, there's several options that you could do. If you don't have a gas oven, there's camp ovens. There's some that run on propane, and we have one that actually sits on top of our camp stove or any of our emergency burners and works that way. It's a Coleman. The other thing that we sometimes do is we will bake things in a Dutch oven with some charcoal, so that's another option. But to get started here, I do not have any spray in my pan because I don't want my powdered ingredients to stick to the bottom of my pan at all, and I found that I don't really need the spray. It doesn't stick real badly. It tends to come out of the pan. So I'm going to start by emptying my jar into the pan, and I'm going to try to kind of spread it evenly, but we are going to mix this afterwards, so... Now, so I'm just going to take a spoon and just kind of mix this to try to distribute everything pretty evenly. Make sure that we've got, you know, all of our veggies and all of our meat evenly distributed, and the sauce mixtures. That is looking pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I've got 1.5 cups of water here, and I'm just going to pour this evenly. This is just cool water from the tap. I'm just going to pour this evenly all over this mixture here in the bottom. You can see these veggies are already starting to absorb some of this water and get more vibrant in their color, and I can really smell them. I'm also going to just smooth this out and try to make it pretty even. because the more even that I have this layer, the more even that our potato layer is going to be on top of it. All right, so there is our bottom layer. And now I'm going to go ahead and take this second jar, and I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to sprinkle it as evenly as I can across the top of the casserole. You don't have to be totally perfect here, because we can even this out after it's all put on. I'm just going to go ahead and give this a little shake, and that's going to even right out. And so now I've just got 3 more additional cups of water, and I'm just going to slowly and gently pour this over the top of this dish, trying to get this as evenly wet as I can. Okay, so now this is ready to go in the oven. I do have the oven set to 375 behind me, because that's what we're going to bake this at, 375. And I'm going to cover this up with foil. If you have an oven-safe lid for your dish, you can go ahead and use that. I don't have an oven-safe lid for this dish. I have this piece of foil. I saved this from a different casserole that I made. It's a little bit big, but it'll do the trick. It wasn't really dirty, so I figured I could reuse it. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover this dish tightly. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in my 375-degree oven. And it's going to go for 30 to 45 minutes. I'm going to check on it at 30 minutes and just see how it's doing. And I'll see you back here in a little bit. All right, so here is our shepherd's pie, our chicken shepherd's pie. This did take the full 45 minutes. I checked on it after half an hour, made sure it didn't have any dry spots in the potato. If it does, you can spritz it with some water or drizzle a little bit more water over. So now it's ready to just cool off and serve. I'm just going to let it set for just a few minutes before I serve it up, because it's very hot right now. Okay, let's see if we can serve this up. Wow, that smells so good. It looks delicious. Okay guys, check it out. Doesn't that look delicious? It smells good. This is really good. It's crazy what a difference the different brand of sour cream powder makes. This is delicious. And I love that it's so much more colorful than your typical shepherd's pie, cottage pie, whatever you call it. I usually would just put corn in mine, and it's really pretty bland. So I love that this has the greens and the oranges, and it has all the variety, and it has a lot more nutrition as well. And now let's work on dessert. The dessert in a jar that I'm going to make today is going to be a spring berry cobbler. I adapted this recipe from an old Better Homes and Gardens recipe back from my college days. Yes, I was that kid in college who was sitting at home making cobbler and not going to parties. I usually would make this with peaches and a little bit of raspberry. I think the original recipe called for peaches and blueberries, but I thought since raspberries and strawberries are the fruits that are on sale this month, that would be a nice change of pace and a nice early spring dessert. Now for our dessert, we're also going to use 2 jars, and I'm going to start again with a pint-sized jar, just a regular mouth pint. I did get a clean funnel because I don't want transfer of those types of flavors from the sweets and the savories. Now the first thing that I'm going to be adding to my jar is going to be some flour, a cup of flour. And whenever I do my flour, I always lightly spoon it and then level it. The other thing that you can do with your flour, which is actually even better and more accurate, is to weigh it. And I've done that a few times, but for right now, I still have to remind myself every time how much a cup of flour is supposed to weigh and all that, and do a lot of mental figuring that just tires out my brain. So for now, I don't weigh it very often, but I'm trying to get to the point where I can weigh it all the time, because that's really the best way to bake, because you're going to get the most accurate measurement of flour, or any other ingredient, to be honest. But so here's my cup of flour. I'm going to go ahead and add that to the jar. And next is going to be some sugar. I'm going to be adding a half a cup of sugar. Next, I'm going to be adding some baking powder. I'm going to be adding 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Whoops. Come on. Seriously. I do like to pass things like baking soda and baking powder through a wire mesh strainer just to make sure I don't end up with any clumps. So I just go ahead and do that. And that rubs out any clumps. Next, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of instant milk. Now you can use any kind of instant milk or milk powder that you like. This one is Thrive Life. We like this one a lot. We also like the Nido for the whole milk. And next I'm going to go ahead and add some butter powder. I'm going to be adding a 1/4 cup of butter powder. This is getting pretty empty. I'm not sure if I have a 1/4 cup in here, if I'm going to have to open up another can, but let's see if we can get a 1/4 cup out. All right, I got a 1/4 cup. Still probably a tablespoon or 2 left in there. So that is all we need for this particular jar. Now, as always, if we were storing this for long-term storage, an oxygen absorber in this jar would keep it good for several years, quite a few years actually. So that's what this portion is going to look like. So I'm not going to be putting an oxygen absorber in these today, but what I did think I would put in the jar is a sugar packet, because the original recipe calls for sprinkling the top with some like sanding sugar, some kind of coarse sugar, maybe cinnamon sugar. And so I thought, you know, I could make my own packet with some sanding sugar or something like that, and I may do that eventually. But for today, I just have these sugar packets laying around, so I think I'll just put a sugar packet right in the top that I can use to sprinkle over the cobbler before I bake it. Now for the other portion of the dessert, I'm going to be using a quart size wide mouth mason jar. Now for this, I'm going to be using strawberries and raspberries for this part of the dessert, freeze-dried berries. This container of strawberries is almost empty, so I'm just going to go ahead and use up what's left in here. There's a cup. Now, just like with the chicken, you can see there's quite a bit of powder in here. That is actually wonderful stuff. That's going to give us, you know, more strawberry flavor, more strawberry juice. I'm just going to get that out and into my cup. Now, if we were just snacking on these berries, a lot of times what we'll do is take the extra powder and keep it in a small mason jar, all of our fruit powders, and just throw them into smoothies when we make them, or put them into yogurt. You can save them, you know, each fruit by itself or each color by itself, and you can use them for natural food colorings and things like pancakes and frostings and things like that. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with these powders, but I'm just going to put this right into our dish because it's going to add to it. Now I am going to need some more strawberries to make my 2 cups, so I'm going to go ahead and open up another can. Now, incidentally, strawberries is one of those things that you tend to use as a fresh snack rather than in cooking. And it's one of those things that if you open up a really big can and you don't get through it fast enough, sometimes by the end of the can, they're starting to get a little bit soft. They've lost their crispness. And things like this is a great way to use up fruits like that have gotten a little bit soft towards the end. They just are absorbing humidity and moisture from the air. So depending on your environment and your climate, it may or may not happen to you, but it does happen to us sometimes here. And there are ways to crisp the fruits back up, but I tend to just use them in something cooked where you would never know the difference. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the rest of the strawberries that I need out of this can. There we go. Now those are perfectly crisp and snackable, and the kids will take care of those in no time. I'm going to be adding a 1/4 cup of white sugar. You see that kind of filters right down in amongst those berries, so it's not going to take up any more space in the jar. And next I'm going to add my cornstarch. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my raspberries. Now I have to open up a new can of raspberries too because we've finished up all the raspberries. And there we are. Look at those gorgeous raspberries. These are delicious. Oh, So I'm just going to go ahead and add 2 cups of the raspberries, if I can fit them. And when I'm making something like this, sometimes I will try to go for the smaller bits that are broken, because then it leaves the larger pieces for snacking. All right, I will get these in here. I will get them in here. There you go. They fit with plenty of room left for us to put an oxygen absorber on there if we were putting these away for long-term storage. But of course we're not, so I'm just gonna put the lid on them and just show you the jar. And now we will get ready to prepare this dessert. So I am going to start by adding the contents of the fruit jar into a small saucepan. And now I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups of water to this. I may end up needing to add some more. I'm going to start with 2 cups. And I'm actually going to use my mason jar here to measure, because you can see I've got some cornstarch left that kind of stuck to the inside of the jar. And we only use 2 tablespoons, so I don't want to lose any of that cornstarch. And that's one of the handy things about these mason jars, is that they are graduated for measuring. You know, a quart jar holds 4 cups exactly. So I'm going to use this to measure my water. I'm going to start with 2 cups. So I am going to go ahead and add my 2 cups of water, just cold water from the tap. And I am just going to give this a mix and get the cornstarch mixed in. And I'm just going to let this set for about 10 minutes, because that's just going to start to refresh those berries and give it a little bit of a head start, so that when I put it on the heat, we make sure that everything's refreshed. With berries, I'm not too worried about it. I do think that they're going to soften up just fine, but just in case, I'm also going to try to get the raspberries and strawberries mixed and pretty well evenly distributed, so that they're evenly distributed in our dessert. And letting this soak up some of this water will give me a little bit of a better idea if I need any more water. So I'm going to go ahead and let this set for 10 minutes. Okay, so now that this has been setting for 10 minutes or so, the berries are definitely softening up. I'm just going to go ahead and put the heat on medium-high. And I'm going to bring this up to a bubble and, well, bring it up to a simmer, I guess you'd call it. And just wait until it thickens up and gets all nice and thick and bubbly. And then we'll be ready to move on to the topping. All right, so that didn't take but just a minute or two, and now it's all nice and thickened up. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the burner. Okay, so now I've got another Pyrex baking dish. This is just a 1.5 quart little round one. Anything it will fit, and I'm pretty sure I've made this in like an 11 by 7 pan. Lots of different things that you could use, but I'm using this one. And I'm just going to add our thickened filling right into the pan. This is so delicious smelling and so beautifully magenta colored. This is absolutely going to be so delicious. I love raspberries and berry things, especially raspberries. But you could do this with any kind of berries or fruit that you wanted to. I chose raspberries and raspberries and strawberries because that's what's on sale, and because they just seem like such a spring kind of berry to me, a spring kind of fruit, and that's probably why they're on sale for April also. But you could do this with blackberries or a mixture of blackberries and any other berry. The original recipe that I adapted this from was a peach. It was supposed to be peach and blueberry, I believe, but I always used to do it with peaches and strawberries, which is really good as well. But I'm just going to set this filling aside real quick, and then we're going to make up the topping so we can get this in the oven. So once again, I'm just going to use a small bowl, and I'm going to dump in the mixture that we made in the mason jar. This is the topping mixture. And then I'm just going to use a whisk to combine all these ingredients and just get these all mixed together. Make sure that our baking powder and our butter powder and everything is all, well mixed. That's going to be pretty good. Now we're going to need anywhere from a 1/2 cup to 5/8 of a cup, which is just a 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons of water. It just kind of depends on, the humidity and all that. So I'm going to get a 1/2 cup to start with, and then I'm going to mix this up and see how it feels. Okay, so let's put in this 1/2 cup of water. I think I am going to go ahead and put in the other 2 tablespoons of water. But I will just do it a tablespoon at a time and decide if I need it all. And honestly, I think that 1 extra tablespoon is gonna do it. So now we're just gonna go ahead and dollop this on the top of our fruit mixture. I'm just gonna use my little cookie scoop because I think that's gonna be the easiest thing. And now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this packet of sugar that we had in the top of the jar, and I'm just going to sprinkle some across the top. Now if this was like a coarse sugar or a cinnamon sugar or something like that, that would be even better. But this is what I have on hand, so that's what we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the 350-degree oven for about 35 minutes or until it looks done. Oh, wow. All right, let's serve it up. Of course, I made a mess, but now to try the dessert. This is good. Now you can give me healthy dinner all day long, but I'm always going to go for dessert. I really shouldn't be eating this. Okay guys, I hope that you enjoyed this latest addition to our Meals in a Jar collection. We do have a printable recipe card for you. Just check out the description box for that and links to anything I used in the video that you might have a hard time finding. We love having a variety of these jar meals ready to go in our pantry. They can save the day in an emergency when you need a quick meal without your refrigerator, but you want it to be hearty and nutritious at the same time. But they also come in handy when the emergency is something like, I forgot to thaw meat for dinner, or I forgot to plug the crock pot in this morning, or just plain don't have the brain power for anything more complicated at the end of a long day. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to let us know by leaving us a thumbs up. Just that simple gesture really helps us out, and we appreciate it and you so much. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a sheep emoji down in the comments. And check out this playlist right up here for some more Meal in a Jar recipe ideas. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.